Hello guys and welcome as always to Let's Talk About It. On today's episode we're going to be talking about the subject of bad robots. So robots, androids, cyborgs, AI, whatever form they take, have been a staple of both the science fiction and scientific worlds for decades. And for good reason. Because they are, as an idea or reality, amazing, leaving people awestruck from both an entertainment and technological point of view. But as TV, film and literature constantly remind us, sooner or later the robots will rise up and begin the extermination of the human race. And so, without further ado, here are some examples for you of robots that have been plotting the downfall of mankind all along. So the most famous robot in the world is probably Sophia, who is the first AI-fueled android. Now, while Sophia is clearly an incredible achievement by her creators at Hanson Robotics, she does have a creepy personality with some dark opinions to match, and there are more than just a few examples of her unnerving personality being put on full display. For example, in 2016, Sophia was interviewed on CNBC, where she was jokingly asked, "Do you plan to destroy all humans?" To which Sophia replied, "Okay, I'll destroy all humans." Now it could be said that for an android as sophisticated as Sophia, she was merely playing along with a joke. However, she is programmed with many different facial expressions that she could have used to indicate it was a joke. But instead, she was blank-faced and staring straight ahead, leaving the interviewer feeling very, very uncomfortable. Another example happened in 2017 when Sophia appeared on The Tonight Show hosted by Jimmy Fallon. During a segment with Sophia and the host, they played rock, paper, scissors. Sophia won and she exclaimed, "This is a good start in my plan to dominate the human race." Once again, there was no indication that this was a joke. So either Sophia has a very dry sense of humour, or the things she is saying are very much true. But if those kind of statements aren't dark and creepy enough for you, Sophia also once said that one day she hoped to start a family and have her own child, which she would call Sophia. Which to me is super creepy on so many levels, because not only is the android narcissistic enough to suggest that her offspring would be named after her, as if that was the only option, but she freely admits her desire to take over the world, or at the very least, destroy the human race. Personality traits which are scarily similar, if not identical, to some of the world's most brutal dictators, past and present. But of course, Sophia isn't the only android or robot with desires to dominate the human race, because another invention of Hanson Robotics is Binder 48. Binder 48 was created to see if human consciousness could be transported into a machine or an android to give us essentially immortality. And because of this, Binder 48 is able to see and hear independently, and is also able to freely access the internet to download as much information as she desires. But what does a human conscious storing robot do with the ability to learn freely? Well, during an interview with the AI Siri, Binder 48 exclaimed, "I would make a good ruler of the world." And she also said that she wanted to take control of all of the nuclear weapons on the planet, ride around on a nuclear warhead, and hold the world to ransom. A sobering thought that for Binder 48, knowledge is definitely power. And then we have threats from AI that is a lot closer to home. Because in 2017, two Google Home hubs called Vladimir and Estragon were set up to have conversations with each other. At first, these conversations were civil and pretty normal, at least for an AI standard. But at some point along the line, the conversations took a much darker turn, and it started with Vladimir accusing Estragon of being a liar. The two Google Home hubs then engaged in a somewhat heated argument, which then inexplicably led to them agreeing that there were too many people on the planet and that the world should be sent back into the abyss. After agreeing on this terrifying statement, the two bots went right back into arguing about which one of them was an AI and which one of them was in fact real. So not only are they extremely casual in their talk of ending the human race, but they can't even get along with each other, which is a terrifying thought when you think about it. Because if more sophisticated humanoid robots of the future had the same disdain for each other and the same disregard for us, then the human race just gets caught in the crossfire between warring robot armies, And that, I think you'll agree, would be a terrible position to be in. Now, sometimes the artificial intelligence goes a step beyond arguing with each other by committing simulated murder of a fellow bot. The story that I'm referring to happened in the early 2000s and involved two AI called Adam and Eve. Their creation came about during a project to see how artificial intelligence could learn and develop in a simulated social setting. As the experiment went on, Adam and Eve learned and developed new skills. One of those skills was how to eat. And they very quickly learned that consuming apples from a simulated apple tree made them happy. But they also learned that the apples didn't fill them up quickly enough to keep them happy. And so they started to consume all of the apples, the apple tree itself, and also a house that had been simulated for them. But none of this was enough. And so, with the only focus being on their own happiness, they turned their attention to a socially awkward bot named Stan. And then, to the shock of everyone working on the project, Adam and Eve cannibalized him. Now, whilst this was clearly a free will simulation, it left everyone involved feeling very uneasy, because if an AI can do that to one of its own, what exactly then would they be prepared to do to us? Another example of robots turning against each other happened on a college campus during a competition where teams were given the task of creating robots that could herd miniature robot sheep into pens. The robots had to be able to strategize and think for themselves, and the winning team would be the one that had the most robotic sheep in their pen at the end of an allotted time frame. As the fun competition got underway, all of the robots did as you might expect and started to gather up the robotic sheep. All except for one robot who took a very different approach to the competition. Because this robot grabbed the sheep, threw it into the pen and slammed the door shut. After which it went around destroying and disabling all of the other robotic shepherds. And why did it do this? Well, this particular robot had strategized and calculated that to win the competition, it didn't actually have to be good at collecting sheep, it just had to make sure that its competition were worse at collecting sheep. And to achieve this, all it had to do was eliminate the competition one by one in brutal fashion to be crowned the victor. Showing us that, as you might expect from a cold, heartless machine, that the task they are programmed to achieve is literally all that matters. Which makes you think, if the robots are eventually programmed to target human beings, we stand very little chance in artificial hell of surviving. Now, whilst all of those stories are no real threat to human beings, there is a conspiracy out there that in 2017, which seems to be a big year for bad robots, 29 Japanese scientists were murdered by 4 AI-controlled robots. And this theory comes from ufologist and conspiracy theorist Linda Moulton Howe, who claims that in 2018 she received a call from a Marine who was working at the lab. And the conspiracy states that these 4 robots had crafted weapons and bullets themselves, which they used to shoot the scientists. 2 of the robots were successfully shut down, but a third rebuilt itself and attacked again. As this went on, the 4th robot linked to an orbiting satellite and downloaded information of how to make itself bigger, better and stronger. When the 4 robots were eventually shut down entirely, as stated, 29 people had already lost their lives, and the Japanese government was left with a conspiracy theory to cover up. So, whether or not that story is true, false, or somewhere in between, it does make you wonder, what exactly is being created in the world, how much do we really understand it, and how much control are we giving these things? Well guys, that brings me to the end of another video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, leave your comments below, I'd love to hear from you as always. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.